What's going on, guys? This is Josh aka Future40 Reviews, giving you a second part of a three-part 2020 review roundup. This one, I have a lot more movies to talk about here, so this is going to be a long one. And if you guys are new to the channel, please be sure to like this video, comment down below on any of the movies that you have seen. Timestamps will be in the description box down below, and share this video. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to get notified when the newest videos are up, the newest live streams, or when I post on my community tab. Otherwise, you're not going to get every single notification for every single one of those things. And if you guys like what you see here, and if you want to support the channel, go right ahead. Be a part of my Epictasticness family. If you want some money to my chime, or send fan mails, you can DM me or email me privately. Also, check out my merchandise store in the description box down below. And also, check if you would like to send anything to my Amazon wish list, you can do that as well. Now, according to the second half of the 2020 review roundup, there are more than 18 or 19 movies here. This goes back to one movie that came out in January, and this is going to be very interesting because here with this 2020 catch up part 2, there were 20 movies that I saw and they're bad, and we're going to get into this. I'm not going to go in depth with all of them because there are some here that I just want to give my quick thoughts on and just go to the next one. But with that being said, we're going to get started here. And what a way to kick this off, because we got The Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson, which was directed by Daniel Farrans. And in this movie, Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ronald Goldman were brutally murdered in her Los Angeles home by whom which must believe to be O.J. Simpson, who role that Glenn Rogers, also known as the Casanova Killer, played in their death. This stars Mina Suvari, Taryn Manning, Agnes Bruckner, and CJ Wood, and Nick Stahl. And let me just go ahead and say this right now so I do not get mixed up. Sucked! I wasn't even the biggest fan of The Haunting of Sharon Tate, and I still hate that movie. But let me tell you something right now.
It's so much worse.
Yup, I hated almost nearly every single thing about the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. There is almost not a damn redeeming positive about this movie. Now, there are two things I can say about this movie. One, the acting is fine from the cast. The performances by Mina Suvari, Taryn Manning, Nick Stahl, and everyone else in this cast, I think are fine. Also, cinematography is somewhat fine. That is pretty much it, because everything else in this movie sucks. Daniel Farrans, you may be a good documentary director, but you are not very good when it comes to telling stories like this as a director. Because this is not even historically accurate to those events of the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. This movie is downright boring, lame, cliched, and one of the worst boring things I've seen in a very long time. The characters in this movie are very offensive, and then this movie asks you to say, what if someone else murdered O.J. Simpson's wife? Which I will kid you not, we all know the real story here, and this is insulting to the Nicole Brown Simpson murders. It's downright disgraceful, distasteful, and just not very well executed. The score is very forgettable. The story in this movie, there is no story. It's just a bunch of stupidity that they want you to believe instead of actually focusing on the real life events. I know people hate it, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, for some historical inaccuracies, but you know what? Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was a better made film compared to both this movie and The Haunting of Sharon Tate. This movie also is painfully slow. This movie is so slow, I literally had to turn this movie off twice because I could not sit through through this movie in one sitting. I had to basically take 3 days to watch this movie. And it was a painful experience to do it. I really did not enjoy watching The Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. Also, just the fact that movies like this by Daniel Farrens, I can tell that he tried, so I have to give credit for that. But at the same time, you still pretty much insulted the real life events of something that is not meant to be physically played with. So at the end of the day, while there are some decent performances and the cinematography is fine at best, The Murder of Nicole Brown Simpson suffers from lazily written script, lazily written direction. It disrespects the events of the own true person that this movie is based around on. And this movie is not very satisfying and not very good. That is really insulting, it's really bad. And I'm absolutely embarrassed that this thing is not the worst movie of 2020. After We Collided, it's still the worst movie of 2020, but this is just not that great of a film. And obviously, this movie has every single reason to be in my worst movies of 2020, and for a good reason. And obviously this movie is going to get the worst of the worst. This is going to get a JD Get Out of My Face Club for badness. Next up here is Horse Girl, which is produced by the Duplass brothers and is directed, of course, by Jeff Baena and stars Alison Brie. And a socially awkward woman with a fondness for arts and crafts, horses, and supernatural car shows finds in her increasingly lucid dreams trickling into her waking life. This movie, I will say this movie was okay. This movie was just okay. It wasn't horrible. I didn't hate it. It definitely is one of the most average Netflix movies, but it was decent enough. I will say you have to be in the right mood to know what this movie is. And for me personally, I do appreciate the performances there. Alison Brie is really good. And also, her first screenplay is very ambitious and original. That is one thing I have to give credit to this movie. The performances are also really good. From Alison Brie, Delby Ryan, and the rest of the cast. Everyone in this movie does a really great job. However, unfortunately, the biggest misfire here is the tonal shift, because I thought that the change of tones is not very consistent with what is going on here. This movie has a little bit of confusion on what this movie wants to be. There is an interesting story about the symptoms of schizophrenia when untreated, and the disease goes to a delusional state of complete reality loss. And this is a good portrait, a decent portrait of a terrible mental condition. And there are some emotional aspects here in this movie. I gotta give credit to where credit is due. And I think the cinematography and the direction and the technical aspects as far as the score and script is also really well done here. And I give Alison Brie credit for trying. But this movie basically is just, it simultaneously frustrates me and entertains you. Now, the craft is absolutely there, but the first act is a romantic comedy. Then the movie goes into a drama. Then this movie kind of goes into something like a psychological drama. And I basically didn't really get the whole feeling of what was going on there. I felt like that could have been done a lot better. And I felt like that it was a bit of a missed opportunity there. Because also, the movie, the big thing I didn't like about this movie was the ending. The ending of this movie just didn't really work for me. I really didn't like the ending of the movie. I thought the ending of the movie was, while ambitious, but it didn't really have a lot to say there. And I will say that while the execution, while at times it's also pretty good. It just wasn't fully there as far as his wholeheartedness goes. I didn't hate A Horse Girl. I thought it was fine, but it's definitely a Netflix movie that I'll probably just watch once, which I have at this point, and probably won't watch again. But the performances are really good, and I think there is a good message somewhere. I just wish the movie was a little more better executed. I'm gonna give Horse Girl a stream this thing, because I didn't hate it. Next up, we have The Night Clerk, which is directed by Michael Christopher and stars Ty Sheridan, Ana de Armas, and Helen Hunt, and John Leguizamo. And in this movie, a hotel night clerk, Ben Bromley, is a highly intelligent young man on the autism spectrum. When a woman is murdered during his shift, he becomes the prime suspect. And as the police investigation closes in, Bart makes a personal connection with a beautiful guest named Andrea, but soon realizes he must stop the real murderer before she becomes the next victim. This movie also, I actually thought was okay. I thought this was a fine film. Now, what I like about this movie, this so-called suspense movie, while it isn't very suspenseful, I will say the performances were pretty good, and I also loved Ana de Armas. And the direction was also very well done here. I really do like the direction here, and I love the cinematography. The cinematography and the orchestral score and the technical aspects aside is fine. Unfortunately, what the Night Clerk does suffer from me a bit is the whole love tease. I was very equally disappointed with it. I get you were actually going for that with Ty Sheridan under the Armas, but it wasn't really. It was pretty wasteful there. Also, I do have to admit, I did like seeing the whole thing with Ty Sheridan as an autistic character because of me being autistic myself, but this movie is just kind of bad. The movie, I know, I understand what this movie was going for. It was going for something different, and I do give credit to where credit is due. But it's just this basically is basically a thriller, and is very confusing here. Now, I will have to say that the there are many elements that are explored in a different way, which I do like it, but the script doesn't really do this actors any favors, and I also would like the actors. Ty Sheridan was great, Ana de Armas is always great usually. John Leguizamo I thought was good, and everyone else in this movie I thought was really solid. I just felt like that the writing and direction wasn't there at the strongest, and there were quite a couple of times in this movie where I basically just held off for reviewing this movie because I had to, because the whole thriller idea with the killer, it didn't really have much going for it, and I felt like that for a movie like this, that's basically a drama thriller, you could have had a lot more going for it. But I still think Ty Sheridan does have a great career still going for him, and between this and Dark Phoenix, I will pretty much watch this over X-Men Dark Phoenix because that movie was not that great, and I don't blame him for that movie. He did the best he could with it. But it's just, here I feel like the potential was there, but it was very wasted and very not fully developed as I think it should have been. But I still found some enjoyment out of it. Like I said, the cast was good. I did like the direction, and I did like a lot of what this movie was trying to focus on. So I very much think that the movie succeeded in what it wants to do. I just felt like execution-wise and story-wise, it could have been a lot better. But I'm gonna say you can wait to watch this movie on Netflix. Next up is All the Bright Places, and this is where we get into something good, which this stars Elle Fanning and Justice Smith and is directed by Brett Haley, based on the novel of the same name. Two teens facing personal struggles form a powerful bond as they embark on a cathartic journey
chronicling the wonders of Indiana. This was actually not too bad. I actually pretty much enjoyed this movie. Of course, the two standouts here are Elle Fanning and Justice Smith. They are great as Violet Market and Theodore Finch. I think they do a great job with what they're given. They have very good chemistry. And I thought that they really brought out a lot of this movie's performance. Also, Alexandra Shipp, Kelly O'Hara, Lamar Johnson, Virginia Gardner also really did a great job here. And Keegan Michael Key was also fun to watch, as well as Luke Wilson. Brett Haley as directing and the writing of this movie was also really something good here. I really did care about the characters. I loved the cinematography, production design, the costume design, the editing. Where this movie does falter a little bit for me is that it can become quite predictable when you get into the end of this movie. And I felt like that could have easily been avoided. But what this movie challenges you to do is basically deal with heavy topics that would be the most realistic way. And that was saying something because I think it does the book justice. It's tender, it's subtle, and it's still powerful from what it's trying to say. The story of two young people trying to find a place in the world by trying to grab life while faced with grief and trauma. And I think the actors portray this in the best possible way. Also, it's pretty rare that coming of age actors feel so well with their characters. Music department is very soothing and sonic landscape. I wish they would have explored Theodore's character a bit more. There were some important things they have to left out from the book, which I haven't read. I'm judging this as an adaptation, as all books of film adaptations should be judged. But it is what it is. It never shies away from the discussion of mental illness. There were a lot of moments of dialogue that resorts to easy tropes, but the narrative is very dignified when dealing with difficult, often indescribable feelings. It's a movie with open hearts, unafraid kisses, never-ending grief, often lived in silence. With the familiar foundations of a well-worn genre, all the bright places build something braver than expected. And Netflix, I'm very happy that Netflix did this. This was actually pretty good, and this movie basically tells you that even if you have a mental illness, you are not alone. So I definitely have to give credit to where credit is due, and I very much loved all the bright places. If I could at least upscale my list for more, I would give this in the top 50, and I highly recommend this movie. This was really good. Next up is Psych 2, Lassie Comes Home, which is the long-awaited sequel to Psych the movie, and it's based on the Psych TV series. And after Santa Barbara Police Chief Carlton Lassiter is ambushed and left for dead, Sean and Gus returns to help him and find themselves embroiled on a case involving the personal, the professional, and even with the supernatural. Now, I am a big fan of Psych, the TV show. I think that is one of my favorite shows to watch. It's so funny and it's very clever. And I also really love Psych the movie as well. Psych the movie was very entertaining. So when I heard that there was going to be another Psych movie coming out, I got very excited to see it because I did miss seeing Sean and Gus. And this premiered on the Peacock streaming service, and which is completely free, which is how I watched this. But Psych 2 Lassie Come Home, this was a very fun sequel. It was very entertaining, and I had a lot of fun watching it. First off, let me just say it is great to see James Roday, Dule Hill, Timothy Robinson, Maggie Lawson, and Kirsten Nelson, and Corbin Burnson back as their respective characters. They all do great in their performances that are given to them. And it's been years since we've last had a Psych movie, and I really loved seeing all these characters come back. It was very funny, about familiar territory, but it has a lot of emotional weight that it does have, and I did love the whole thing with these characters. And it basically just made you feel like you were involved with this mystery with them. There, there was a lot of fun, awesomeness to this movie, and I very much loved what this movie was going for, and I liked what this movie was doing, and it explored this the friendship that it was very well done. I loved it was more mature than it was. The writing in this movie was great. I loved the direction. The camera work was very awesome, and I thought that the musical score was funny. There were some funny movies that I just laughed my ass off, and I had a blast laughing with a lot of the scenes in this movie. I was very happy, and I was very awesome, and it was just so cool. And I very much loved what this movie was going for. And I liked a lot of things that this movie was trying to do. This was a very fun sequel, and I was very happy with what this movie wanted to go for, and I really was very happy that this was not a bad film. There are some negatives that I do have. There were some jokes that didn't really hit the landing, and while I was not a big fan of the whole twist villain reveal, I still think there was a lot of good things that outweighs the bad that made me very happy. Psych 2 Lassie Comes Home was a very fun sequel that very much lived up to my expectations, and this could have gone wrong, but I was very happy with it, and I'm going to give it a better than Vampire Academy, because it's damn good. Next up here is The Rental, which this was Dave Franco's directorial debut, and this movie, I'm gonna say it right now, this was actually pretty freaking cool for a directorial debut. Two couples on an oceanside getaway grow suspicious that the host of their seemingly perfect rental house may be spying on them. Before long, what should have been a celebratory weekend trip turns into something far more sinister. And I have to say, The Rental, this was actually pretty damn good. I loved this movie. Now, it's not perfect, but this is a great directorial debut for a slight thriller, and for what it's worth, this was a solid start to him behind the lens. Our cast with these actors are very fantastic, and they sell this sometimes schlocky material with earnest. Stan Stevens is a great actor, and he wanes between dreamy and sleazy with ease, while Alison Brie is Everson's. Jeremy Allen White has some of the weightiest material all time, and Sheila Van does a really great job here. What I love about this movie, the atmosphere is really great, and I love the concepts. It's really terrifying in this day and age, and I really love what the movie wanted to do. It had a very sense of atmosphere. I love the camera work and some of the way he decides to use camera shots here. The musical score I thought was very nice. It was a very haunting and creepy musical score, and the editing in this movie was really paced well. I was sitting there on the edge of my seat like, what was going to happen next? Are they going to get out of this alive? Because if you go to a vacation with your friends and with your girlfriend, you are easily going to get your ass handed to you. Now, of course, the script does have some conveniences, and I do wish the script could have easily avoided these conveniences. But at the end of the day, the star act doesn't really tie up so nicely. I didn't really like the third act, and it ended up becoming something else rather than having anything to say or observations to make. And I kind of feel like you could have done that a little bit better, but this is his first directorial debut, and also he did the best with what he was doing with writing, but at the end of the day, I still very much enjoyed what this movie was giving me. So at the end of the day, I'm gonna give this movie an Epictastic. Next up, we have An American Pickle, directed by Brandon Trost and stars Seth Rogen in dual roles. An immigrant worker at a pickle factory is accidentally preserved for 100 years and wakes up in modern day Brooklyn, and he learns his only surviving relative is his great grandson, a computer coder who he can't connect with. This actually had me interested because Seth Rogen was playing dual parts, and I saw a trailer for this, and it was going to be on the HBO Max streaming service. And I have to tell you, this was actually pretty decent. Brandon Trost makes his directorial debut. He's always known for his cinematography, but I have to say that this was actually pretty decent. I really enjoyed this. It was very funny. It was very entertaining. The first 30 minutes are very entertaining here. I do love the first 30 minutes. You have a lot of the best moments with Seth Rogen, getting along with Seth Rogen. You can tell that he has to play two different characters, and I very much enjoyed that as well. Everyone else in this movie I thought was also really good. The film is strange, is something. I had fun, and I very much enjoyed the humor side of things. The cinematography work was also really good. I loved the production design, the editing, and the score was actually pretty entertaining. And playing two different roles, he distinguishes himself pretty well that those who don't like him as an actor, you do see a comedy only from him, but it's a nice balance with him. He can do great drama and great acting, even in his bad things. There are some conveniences with the plot, and I will say that the story itself can be a little choppy, it can be a little messy, and the movie can be a little too strange for its own good. But at the end of the day, An American Pickle was a pretty entertaining surprise, and I really was happy with how this movie turned out. I very much enjoyed it. There was some great character interactions. I loved the technical aspects. I loved the performances. I loved the cinematography, the score. And I think this was one of the better movies from HBO Max. Considering that we had a lot of delays and a lot of movies on streaming services, this is one of the better streaming services movies that I watched, and I'm absolutely glad that I watched this. I really don't have that much more to say about An American Pickle. Is that if you got HBO Max, I definitely recommend watching this because I had a very good time watching this movie, and I definitely would love to see Seth Rogen do some more stuff like this. So I don't know how much more I can say about this movie. I was very impressed with Brandon Trost's directorial debut. So, at the end of the day, for a rating of American Pickle, I would have to give this a highly recommended. I enjoyed this. I thought it was fun. I thought it was entertaining. I thought it was awesome. It was fantastic. And I do want to see entertaining factor here, and I very much enjoy watching this movie. It was cool, it was awesome, and I enjoyed a lot of what this movie was trying to do. And this was a very fun movie that I very much liked. It's not amazing, and it's not a masterpiece, but fun. Again, highly recommended for this one. Next up, we have Superman, Man of Tomorrow, which is another origin story for our great Superman. It's the dawn of a new age of heroes, and Metropolis has just met its first. But as the Daily Planet intern Clark Kent work alongside reporter Lois Lane, secretly wields his alien powers of flight, super strength, and X-ray vision in the battle for good, and there's even greater trouble on the horizon. This definitely makes up for not having another live action Superman movie, which I'm still pretty much pissed about because Superman is a great character. Now let's get into the voice acting first. We have Darren Criss playing Superman, and he was really good here. Also, Christina Melizia as Maya and Pity. I thought she was good. You have Zachary Quinto, aka Spock himself, as Lex Luthor. Jonathan Kent and Martha Kent are voiced by Neil Flynn and Bellamy Young, and they do really great. But the biggest surprise here for me of the voice acting was Alexandra Daddario as Lois Lane. I did not expect to hear her voice anywhere in this movie, and she is a great actress, and honestly, again, I gotta say it, she's attractive. It's Alexandra Daddario, but her voice acting I thought was very good as Lois Lane. I thought she had great chemistry with Darren Criss. But the rest of the characters here, you also have Martian Manhunter, you have Lobo, you had Parasite / Rudy Jones, Ron Troop. All the voice acting in this movie was really good. And what I really liked about this movie was the animation. The animation in this movie is stunning. This is some stunning animation. It's very great for hand-drawn animated. And it was a fun Superman movie for the DC animated universe. And I very much enjoyed what this movie was going for here. I liked what the movie was offering. I liked the character development. And I very much loved the use of Lobo and Martian Manhunter. I really dug how the film showed Parasite in a more human capacity at first. And he's a pretty lovable guy who just ended up in an unfortunate situation. Superman is still the awesome, same lovable Boy Scout type he always is. I think the only real issue for me in this movie is that I wish the movie was a little bit longer because I was very much enjoying this movie. That's the problem with some DC stuff. Some of the stuff is too long, some of it's too short. But I think that it was very fun to have a new Superman movie like this because it was a lot of fun to basically see them return. I love the origin story, and I very much love the effects and the action scenes for what you require. I very much loved that. I thought it was really cool, and I thought it was very entertaining, and I really liked a lot of what this movie was going for. And so, the animation is pretty intense, and I think the action was very fun. There was some great dialogue and some great humorous moments that I laughed, and the effects were also really good. And Parasite was a very interesting villain, and these are some villains I really would like to see in a Man of Steel 2. Warner Brothers, hear me out. If you do a Man of Steel sequel, use different villains. That is not difficult to do. We want to see another Man of Steel movie with Henry Cavill with a different villain. Even if it's a different director. Bring Lobo in. Bring in Brainiac. Bring in Martian Manhunter. There's a lot you can do here. But honestly, for me, Man of Tomorrow, this is definitely one of my favorite Superman films, live action and in animated form. I very much enjoyed character development. I liked the story, and the action was pretty fun. And I think if you have not seen this, if you are a Superman fan, you will love this. I definitely recommend watch this. It's very fun, very entertaining. And with that being said, despite the movie being a little short, and I wish it went longer, and despite a little bit of an inconvenience, I'm giving Superman Man of Tomorrow an Epictastic because it was that awesome, it was that fun, and I enjoyed myself watching this movie. Next up is another movie I didn't expect here, and that movie is Magic Camp. This one, oh man. Magic Camp is directed by Mark Waters, the director of Mean Girls, Vampire Academy, and Freaky Friday. And in this movie, Andy is at the urging of his former mentor at Magic Camp owner Ward Preston, returns to the camp of his youth, hoping to reignite his career. Instead, he finds inspiration in his ragtag bunch of rootin' magicians. This was a movie I was not looking forward to at all because this, of course, is Disney Plus. But that wasn't why. The reason why is because I'm kind of getting a little sick of most of these movies trying to be the next Harry Potter without but also I wasn't really into a movie about a magic camp. But I still went in with an open mind, and what I got was actually pretty decent. It wasn't great, but it wasn't horrible. But compared to Mean Girls and Freaky Friday, this is the weakest effort from Mark Waters of the Disney films. This is okay. I didn't hate myself while watching it. First off, actors are all really good. Everyone in this cast is really good. You have Adam Devine and the kids I thought were very good. You also had Jeffrey Tambor, Jillian Jacobs was also really good in their roles. Also, direction was really fine. I did like the humor at times. I did like the production design and the rules and regulations of this magic camp. And I very much had a lot of chuckles here and there. I wasn't hating this movie, and I didn't enjoy it as much as I expected to. What didn't work for me is most likely because you stumble across a trailer, and the lack of marketing with this movie was very lame. Oh man. What I didn't really like about this movie, the plot is reminiscent of School of Rock, but just with magic. The only thing I didn't really like, it never dumbs down on itself like other movies like Artemis Fowl. It remains confident in its unoriginal and predictable plot, which is one thing I very much didn't really like. And this movie executes about as well as any film would. It's all about a washed-up magician, and that's pretty much all I could expect to hear. It's just here, the character-centric exploration provides enough depth, but my only issue, it doesn't really bring new to the table. And this movie is heavily predictable, which was a big disappointment for me, since I wish this movie was doing something new. But also, I did like the third act, and also sometimes with the narrative, it could be quite boring at times, because I did find myself a little bored with some of the jokes and some of the humor here. But I still went in and gave this movie an open mind. And surprisingly, this is one of the better Disney Plus movies. This is made up for Artemis Fowl. And with that being said, I don't have too much more to say about this one. So I'm going to go ahead and give Magic Camp the grade of streamers, because it was fun. Next up is Coastal Elites. Coastal Elites stars Betty Midler, Caitlin Dever, Dan Levi, Issa Rae, and Sarah Paulson. And in this movie, a social distance comedic satire this is, and it spotlights 5 characters breaking down and breaking through as they grapple with politics, culture, and the pandemic. Usually when a movie like this about pandemic, it would be Songbird, but this was directed by Jay Roach, and Jay Roach, he is known for movies like Austin Powers and also recently Bombshell. But the reason why I was interested in this is because it looked pretty interesting to me, and I checked it out, and I actually really enjoyed this. I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought it would. First off, the 5 actors in this movie, they do great. Issa Rae is great as always. She's very funny. I liked her. She had a lot of jokes that I very much liked. Betty Midler from Hocus Pocus, great actress. She was very good as Miriam Nestler. Also, Dan Levi, I thought was really funny and I thought was really good. And Caitlin Dever. Can I just say right now, Caitlin Dever, this this is a great actress. She is a great upcoming actress. She's gorgeous. She's talented. She's awesome. She's epitastic, and just look at her. She's very awesome, and she was great in Booksmart. She's great, unbelievable, and if she deserves to be casted in a big franchise or have a franchise of her own. And also, she's pretty attractive, and she just celebrated her birthday. So, also, I do have to give credit to Sarah Paulson. Sarah Paulson, of course, she is a great actress. She was amazing in Run. I've always liked Sarah Paulson, and I think the cast here does a really good job in what they are given. This is a very short movie, which I will say that is only a nitpick because I was enjoying myself with a lot of the humor. Also, the writing was great. You could tell that this is just them doing virtual at home, and I wasn't bored by the movie. The the way the actors did their work and the way the performances were, I very much enjoyed, and just I had a good time watching this movie. I can't really say too much negative things about this. Basically, it does talk about 2020, the pandemic, and politics and stuff, but you do get some good emotion out of these actors, and you do have a good time watching them. And I very much enjoyed Coastal Lights for what it was, which was a very entertaining film, and I am going to give Coastal Lights an epitastic. Next up is Secret Society of Second Born Royals, which I'm going to be very honest. When I gave this movie, let's just get into the plot. Sam is a teenage royal rebel, second in line to be dethroned of the kingdom of Illyria. Just as her disinterest in the royal way of life is an all-time high, she discovers that she has superhuman abilities and is invited to join a secret society of similar extraordinary of second-born royals charged with keeping the world safe. This is directed by Anna Maestro, and I'm just gonna say right now, when I initially watched this movie, I gave it a 3, and I still stand by that 3, but this movie, I didn't really think it was all that good. I didn't hate it, but this is a little bit of a wasted potential of what could have been. This movie, it flies full only the radar. It doesn't really bring anything new to the table that we haven't seen before, but I will give the movie its merits. I think the performances are good by each of the actors. The only thing I didn't really like here is the adult characters weren't too much, and also I didn't really get much character development out of these characters. And also, I will say it is a movie you can watch for on Disney Plus, but Skylar Astin, he takes the group of heroes through the typical training course as they discover their powers, and the powers are fun enough. The relationships are fine and harmless, and the action does do fine, but this reminds me a lot of Sky High, and Sky High was a much better movie. Unfortunately for me, the direction and writing wasn't really there, and also, while cinematography and visually it looks good, I felt like this is basically style over substance, and I'm just basically kind of just lost interest for a little bit in the second to last half of the movie. The last half of this movie does make up, and I think this had the potential, but it just doesn't know where it wants to be. It wants to be a wannabe Sky High. It wants to be new X-Men. It wants to be all that. But it doesn't really fully grasp on to one and picks one and run with it, which is my biggest issue here. Like I said, the cast is good. Peyton Elizabeth Lee is fine. Skylar Ashley is also fine. I also really like Elodie Young here. Just everything in the movie, I thought was decent, but it's just
this movie had the potential to be something good and be something better, but I feel like the potential is not really much worth watching, and I just felt like that it didn't really do much for me. So at the end of the day, I'm gonna have to say you can just stream this. Now, next up, we have Roald Dahl's The Witches, which is directed by Robert Zemeckis, and is a remake of the old Witches movie, and it's based on the Roald Dahl book of the same name. And it stars Octavia Spencer, Anne Hathaway, Stanley Tucci, and Javier Bruno. And in the late 1967, a young orphan boy goes to live with his loving grandma in the rural Alabama town of Demopolis. As the boy and his grandmother encounter some deceptively glamorous but thoroughly diabolical witches, she wisely whisks him away to a seaside resort. Regrettably, they arrive precisely at the same time that the world's grand high witch was gathered. Now, this, I actually didn't know about this. I went in completely cold. And Robert Zemeckis is a great director, but his latest films have not been all that great. But I still went in with an open mind and hoped for the best. And I thought this movie was meh at best. Now, here's what good I can say. One, the acting is fine. Octavia Spencer, Anne Hathaway, Stanley Tucci, Javier Bruno, and the rest of the cast are fine. Also, direction is good. There's also great composition here. Also, I think the visual effects at times are decent. Other than that, this was a movie that is kind of doesn't know what it wants to be. This movie is very confusing when its tones. It's trying to be a horror film, then it wants to be a fantasy film, and it doesn't really click well here. It's just basically a mashup of mixing tones here that doesn't really collide all that well. And the one thing that Roald Dahl he did hate more than children are film adaptations derived from his work, and honestly, I don't hate the film. I just think this movie is a bit of a wasted potential of what could have been, because you have a great cast, and this movie was also written by Guillermo del Toro, and honestly, if this was Guillermo del Toro directing fully, I think this would have been great A+ material, but this movie has a mashup of mixing tones, and I think the mashup of mixing tones isn't that great. And I also think that a lot of the effects in this movie were pretty bad. And this is a big budget film, and this was also very predictable as well. And also the CG. I'm just gonna have to give this movie a stream it. Cutthroat City was also another movie that really surprised me. Four boyhood friends return to New Orleans' lower Ninth Ward after Hurricane Katrina to find their home decimated and prospects for work swept away. Turning to a local gangster for employment, the crew is hired to pull off a daring casino heist right in the heart of the city. This is directed by the RZA and stars Shameik Moore, Denzel Whitaker, Terrence Howard, Demetrius Shipp Jr., Cat Graham, T.I., Wesley Snipes, and Isaac Gonzalez. And this movie was actually pretty surprisingly good. I did not expect this to be as good as it was. I know there's a lot of people who don't like this movie at all, but for me personally, I got what this movie was doing. I somewhat really kind of enjoyed the movie. I didn't love it. First, I will have to say the performances by the cast, T.I., Shameik Moore, and everyone in the cast is great. They all do great with the characters that are written for them. I will say the standouts were Shameik Moore, T.I., Isaiah Whitaker, and Isaac Gonzalez. And also Cat Graham and Demetrius Shipp Jr. Demetrius Shipp Jr. is a great character. Now,
Ethan Hawke is only in the movie for a few minutes, but this movie was actually really good. It's a really good premise. I do really like what this movie is.
It does get preachy, it does get flamboyant, but I pretty much respected the film for what it was trying to do.
And I have to give credit to what the movie wanted to do. It wasn't grossing. It is ambitious post-Katrina crime film with a rich collection of characters and a deep cast. Some of the direction by DeRuza isn't very great, but he's not known for direction. He's mainly known for writing. But both his anger and the detailed world that comes through. The mix of serious-minded and cartoonish pulp does work for me. And there was a long monologue that I thought was really good.
And while the movie is a little too long, I gotta say these performances, and as well as the cinematography and the editing and production design, really does make this movie what it is. It doesn't have a whole lot of the slang that I would expect to have, but I thought for a movie like this, I think it did the best it could. And also, it was great to see Wesley Snipes in a movie again after so long, because Wesley Snipes is one of my favorite actors, and I've been waiting to see him come back for more movies. And he brings his A game here. He always brings his A game, even if it's a bad film. And this movie is no exception. He is really good here. And just the themes and subject matter that this movie tackles on, I thought was really good. The only thing that does hold this movie back a little bit is some of the direction. But at the end of the day, RZA is not known for his directing. He's mainly known for his writing. And that, I do think that is what really comes over. But at the end of the day, I do have to say, Cutthroat City was definitely one of the better movies I've seen this year. It is a flawed film. It is too long. The characters aren't the greatest, and the execution is not the greatest at times. But I found myself enjoying the movie a lot more than I thought it was going to be. It wasn't a complete train wreck, and nor was it a disastrous movie that I expected it to be. It had a good story, it had some great performances, and it had some pretty decent direction at times, despite some of the direction not being that great. So, Cutthroat City, I do give credit to what this movie was doing, and I have to be fair, and I'm going to give this movie the grade that I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it an Epictastic, because it was a decent movie. Next up here on this movie is Black Beauty. Was the latest other Disney movie, which is another interpretation of the classic Black Beauty story, and this is directed by Ashley Avis, starring Mackenzie Foy and Kate Winslet and Ian Glenn. In this movie, born free in the American West, Black Beauty is a horse rounded up and brought to Britwick stables, where she meets spirited teenager Joe Green. The two forge a bond that carries Beauty through different chapters and challenging and adventures. Black Beauty was actually pretty decent. I didn't hate this one. Now, it is not the best Black Beauty movie ever, and it's definitely not the greatest thing in the world, but this was a very sweet film. What I do really like about this movie is the chemistry of Mackenzie Foy and Kate Winslet as the voice of Black Beauty. It's good to see Mackenzie Foy all grown up in a movie like this, and they have great chemistry in this movie. I do love the great chemistry that they have. Their scenes together were some of my favorite parts of the movie, and I did like the rest of the cast. Ian Glenn was also pretty good. I did also really enjoy Jorah more as the uncle. Everyone else in the movie was really good. Clara Forlani was good, Florian Deacon, David Sherwood. And I also really liked the direction of this movie. The direction I thought was pretty solid. I liked the direction. And just with this one here, it was a little slow, but it was a pretty entertaining film that I very much really liked.
And I found a lot of peace and comfort as I was watching this movie. It was very hard, and there is some emotional weight to this movie. Now, it does have its issues when it comes to some of the performances outside of the rest. The actors I just mentioned, I think some of the rest of the cast do get a little underutilized, but the heart of the movie is really Mackenzie Ford and Kate Winslet's friendship. I thought that was very well done. Kate Winslet does a great job as voice work, and there were some pretty intense moments I almost really had a hard time sitting through with some of the intense moments with the wealthy villains of the story. It does go into that cliche territory with the Black Beauty story, but it was very inspiring. It still found it to be very powerful, and it was still a pretty decent movie despite it not being one of the greatest things ever. It's not the greatest thing Disney Plus has ever done, but I was very, very happy that a movie like this came out because it gave me a sense of hope, it gave me a sense of wonder here, and I think this is one of the movies that I would say check out on Disney Plus. Now, of course, some people may not like this movie, and that's fine, but honestly, this is the better Black Beauty movie that I've seen. This is probably the only one besides, I think, two other ones so far, but I actually very much enjoy it. I will give Black Beauty 2020, I highly recommend it because the performances was great, the heart was there, and it did give me a sense of fun by the end of it, and I enjoy myself. So next up here we have the movie Come Play, which I meant to do a solo review for this movie, but I didn't really get a chance to do a solo review for the film. But Come Play, this was directed by Jacob Chase, and in this movie we have a lonely young boy who feels different from everyone else, and he's desperate for a friend, and he seeks solace and refuge in his ever-present cell phone and tablet. But when a mysterious creature uses the boy's devices against him to break into our world, his parents must fight to save their son from the monster behind the screen. Come Play was actually a really surprisingly good movie. I expected nothing from this movie, but this movie actually was really good. It was really good for a scary movie, and the biggest praise I do have for Come Play is that I really did like the fact that you followed an autistic character because, like I said, with me being autistic, I did love the fact that you have an autistic new main character who feels lonely, and he doesn't say a whole lot throughout the movie, which for some people that may be like, how are you supposed to care about his character? But it's part of autism. Part of me, I basically talk my butt off. But here, when it comes to the character in Come Play, I thought they were pretty serviceable. I think the performances of this movie were really good. I think Jillian Jacobs, John Gallagher Jr., and Ashley Robertson all do a great job in their roles. I also thought the rest of the cast of the movie was really strong as well. They were really strong about this movie. You see that the parents, that they are trying to basically care for their son, and they're trying to protect him. But the thing that I took away from this is that to be careful when you're making imaginary friends because you never know what will happen. And I bought that. Also, the direction and writing in this movie was also really good by Jacob Chase. This is based on the short film that he personally wrote. And I loved what this movie was doing. It was very entertaining, very interesting. And I had a sense of heart by the end of the movie. I wasn't hating it. I did get some good scares out of this movie. I did love the scares. I also very much really liked everything else what this movie was going for. It knew what it wanted to do. I was very creeped out. I had a sense of interest. It knew what it was trying to be. And I appreciate what this movie was going for. The only real issue here is that some jump scares were very cheap or very lame. And I did wish the creature design was more impactful. But the lighting was very well done. I did like the lighting in this movie. But, and another problem here that I did kind of have was there is a lot of SpongeBob stuff here. It feels like a SpongeBob commercial. But at the end of the day, this movie was far better than I expected it to be. This premise was well written and well done. The main character did a really good job with his role. The parents had a lot of passion in their roles. I did wish the writing was a little bit better. And also the kid friendships. And they should have mentioned more about the past and put more detail into it. But I understand what this movie was trying to do. There was some good scares and suspense. There was some good spooky moments. And come play, this was another one of the biggest surprises for me. So I'm definitely giving this an Epictastic. Next up, we have Train to Busan presents Peninsula, which I have to be honest right now. Peninsula, this was a movie that I didn't know much about. I did not see the original Train to Busan right away, but I went into this optimistic, and then after this it made me want to watch the original Train to Busan. And Peninsula, I thought this was good. So the plot of this movie is a soldier and his team battle hordes of post-apocalyptic zombies in the wasteland of the Korean Peninsula. And this was directed by Yeon Sun-ho, the same director as the original, and the cast is Kang Dong-hwa, Lee Jung-ho, Lee Ray, Kwai Hae-young, Kim Min-jae. I don't want to mess up the Japanese actors' names, but all the Japanese performances are really good. I do love the performances here in this movie. Action is really fun. I do love the action in this movie. The action is fun where it needs to be. It was entertaining where it needs to be, and I enjoyed myself what this movie was trying to do. And I very much enjoyed what this movie was. It builds off the first film's world instead of just doing the exact same thing again. Yeon, he decides to leave Alien. He goes aliens with this franchise, and he goes full out, high octane, intense, visceral, and just dropping at times. Now, for a lot of people who love the original Train to Busan, they will see this as a big disappointment. But for me, someone who has not seen the original Train to Busan, I could understand what this movie was doing. This movie combines Transporter, Mad Max Fury Road, and The Walking Dead is pretty good. The tearjerker scene the action scene is not something you're easily going to top. And also, just the action in this movie was pretty fun. The only thing I really wish was better was the character development of these characters, because I didn't get much character development out of these guys as I did with the characters from the first one. But nevertheless, it wasn't like I was hating this movie, and it felt like it did a very good service to the first movie. It's not a direct sequel to Train Busan. This goes into its own direction. This is basically set in the same universe. And just despite some of the flaws this movie have with the character development, some wonky CGI, and there are times where some of the action is a little too crazy, I still found myself enjoying Train to Busan Peninsula very much, and I found myself very much wanting to watch this movie again. I loved what this movie was doing. It was very fun, it was very entertaining, it was very awesome,
and I had a blast watching this movie. This movie was actually really awesome. It made me want to watch the other film, and just if they ever do a Train to Busan 3, I would be down for it because this was fun. I'm giving Peninsula an Epictastic for sure because that was really fun and very entertaining to watch. I did not expect it. Next up is On the Rocks, which was written and directed by Sofia Coppola, stars Bill Murray and Rashida Jones. Faced with sudden doubts about her marriage, about her husband, a young New York mother teams up with her larger-than-life playboy father to tail her husband. And that's all I really want to say. Sofia Coppola is a director who knows what she's doing. Now, I know she's infamous for, of course, Godfather 3, but that really wasn't her fault. But her directing is pretty damn good. I love Lost in Translation. My favorite of hers is The Virgin Suicides. The Beguiled, I actually didn't mind. And The Bling Ring, I thought was really good as well. So going into this, I was very curious to see what happened. And I gotta tell you, this was actually really good. This is one of the best movies of the year. Now, I can see why some people are a little bit disappointed with this movie, but for me, I very much liked what this movie was doing. This was a very super charming movie, which is mellow for the most part, but the simplistic tone I really enjoyed. It's a nice feeling of realism and simplicity, and I really loved the father-daughter relationship between Bill Murray and Rashida Jones. Bill Murray is a great actor, and yes, despite some things he's said about Lucy Liu in the past and other controversies, I think Bill Murray shines at his best here. Rashida Jones is also a really great actress. I love her. I think she's very beautiful, but she's also really talented. She does a great job with the movie. And the third act, I was very much on board with the third act. I liked the third act of the movie. And these two basically do a lot with what they're doing. The third act was built up, and I feel like it got pretty fleshed out pretty well. It did end pretty abruptly, but I was perfectly fine with it. Also, Marlon Wayans is really good here. I liked him in this movie. He was really good. Jessica Henwick was also really good in the movie, as well as Jenny Slate. And I think the cinematography of this movie is really well shot. The directing is very funny. There was a lot of great comedic and dramatic moments I very much enjoyed. And I didn't have a problem with what the movie was going for. I feel like the movie definitely did its job very well. The only real issue I could say of this movie is that I wish this movie was a little longer because I was enjoying the movie that much. It was that entertaining for me. But I still very much held it in. I very much enjoyed what this movie was doing, and I very much liked a lot what this movie had to offer. On the Rocks was a very great film that I very much really enjoyed. It's a really amazing film. It's another amazing effort from Sofia Coppola. Now, next up here, we do have a very underrated one here, and that is the short history of The Long Road, which I felt nobody really saw except me and another other person. And also YouTuber Caillou Pettis. And that is a shame because this was one of the best films of last year. This was amazing. Nola grew up living on the van with her father, Clint, two nomads against the world. And when tragedy strikes, Nola must confront the reality of life on the road alone, learning to own her grief, her past, and her new desperation. This movie, I was actually pretty interested because Sabrina Carpenter was in it. She was taking on a more dramatic role, and I gotta tell you, this was great. Sabrina Carpenter, she is the standout of this movie, and I wish that this movie was seen a lot more, and I wish this was eligible for Oscars.
But unfortunately, nobody went and saw this movie. And Sabrina Carpenter, any hairstyle, you give her any hairstyle, and she is great. The supporting characters aren't are very good here. They don't get a whole lot of development, but the actors does a really great job. But what really is the standout of this movie is the heartfelt take of a young woman's search for meaning in her life, with a fantastic performance by Sabrina Carpenter. I always knew Sabrina Carpenter could act, but in this movie, she acts her ass off. This is a very captivating story. This is non-stop depression. This is basically my answer to Manchester by the Sea, now the camera work is very well done here. I do love the camera work here. The movie is very beautiful and meaningful at times. The rest of the cast in this movie was really good too, but it's really Sabrina Carpenter who brings everything out into this film. She really does a great job here. Stephen Ogg was also really great. Maggie Siff was great. Rusty Swimmer and Danny Trejo were also really good. I really like the friendship that she had with Danny Trejo. Ari Simon Kennedy directs this movie with a lot of heart and a lot of emotion here. And that is why I very much appreciate her writing and direction. It doesn't feel like someone half-assed this. It feels genuinely like she did a great job for this. And just, this movie knew what it was doing. And also, it did give me a sense of hope towards the end of this movie. Just, this movie knew where to hit you. The technical aspects aside, cinematography is great. The production design, the editing was really well done, and the score I thought was very well done. It's just, there are a lot of great moments in here that I felt like were really well done. This and On the Rocks were definitely our seal of approval, but this is a very seal of approval worthy film that I highly recommend checking out. Sylvie's Love was another movie that I didn't expect much out of, and I went in completely blind, and this was another seal of approval worthy movie. It was, sometimes the right love comes at the wrong time. When a young woman meets an aspiring saxophonist in her father's record shop in 1950s Harlem, their love ignites a sweeping romance that transcends changing times, geography, and professional success. And this movie was really freaking good. I loved this film. Tessa Thompson. Let's put aside the controversy that she said about cuties, because that doesn't really matter to me. I'm just judging this movie as a film. And as a film, and as an actress, Tessa Thompson is amazing. She never fails to impress me. She's great in everything she's in. Here is no different. And in this movie, she is great as Sylvie. I love the chemistry that she had with Namadi Asagmugua as Robert. Also, the rest of the cast, Jemima Kirk and Aja Naomi King, and the rest of the cast did a really great job here. What really makes this movie work for me personally is the direction and writing. You got to care about these characters. I got to know these characters. And unlike After We Collided, I actually felt the romance here. I loved the romance here. I thought it was very fleshed out, very well developed, and it has a very nice cinematic influence of Douglas Sirk and Wong Kar-wai. It's a nice mid-century romance throwback, and it strikes the core with the performances. It does become melodramatic at times, but it didn't really hurt the movie. The fantasy regarding Black lives on screen, it is very refreshing, and is a true rebellious middle finger to the establishment. No violence is portrayed against blacks or harassment is displayed. This is a very dainty, impassioned, but not too idolizing looking as Black lives, with his men passionate in their music and love for jazz, while his women being portrayed as financially self-reliant, independent, and smart, leading their families. And this is a fantasy of what could have been, but it stays on the ground, never being too carried away from the harshness of reality. Also, I do love the fact that we get a movie with people of color living life to the fullest. Now, the vision of this movie is really great, the production design is awesome, and the elements surrounding this movie is also really awesome. And the musical score and just the way that this movie plays out, I was very happy with. I could have expected this movie to be a lot worse, but it was not a lot worse. It actually got a lot better for me as the movie went along. And I appreciated it for that. I was never bored for it. The only thing that I could say negative, I don't really have any negatives for this. This has everything I basically want here. So Sylvie's Love basically lived up to my expectations. It was really damn good. It was the second best romance film of the year that wowed me with a well-written screenplay, excellent direction, and a great performance by Tessa Thompson and the main lead actor. So if you have Amazon Video or Amazon Prime, go and watch this movie, guys. Like right now. You will forget about After We Collided in an hour and 54 minutes. Because this is a better made film. I think this is a movie that not many people will like, but I personally loved for my personal taste. And I'm very happy I watched this. And I'm very happy that I was able to close out 2020 with this film. And it just hit me. I gotta give this a seal of approval. Yes, you could say, Josh, you're being too nice, like this movie is a masterpiece, but you know what? It's my personal opinion. And that's how I feel. But the final movie in the part 2 of 2020 review roundup is Love Guaranteed, which this was a Netflix movie. And Love Guaranteed was directed by Mark Steven Johnson and stars Damon Wayans Jr. and Rachel Lee Cook and Heather Graham. And in this movie, a lawyer takes on a new client that wants to sue a dating website because it guarantees love. Now, this movie was another major surprise for me. Now, I gotta say, this movie isn't perfect. Now, this was actually very... I am a sucker for romance movies. I just talked about Sylvie's Love, but this here, I really liked this. Now, but this movie had a good reason to be better than expected to be. It was really corny based on the trailer, but this was a very cute movie. A lot of the scenery looked like Toronto, and while the movie is based in Seattle, I like the fact that it was filmed in Canada. And so, Rachel Lee Cook is really great. At first, I didn't really like her playing the nerd character she always plays, but they gave her a quirky car, and if you're telling me that she could play one song and Stumpton. The costume design is also really great on her as well a lot of these characters. And also, I really like Damon Wayans Jr. I thought he had good chemistry with Rachel Lee Cook. Heather Graham, Candace McClure was also really good. The score was also really entertaining here. You can guess how the movie will go because it's all a bit generic, but it was done in the way that I expected. The scenes of Damon Wayans going on the dates in the first hour was definitely the strongest part of the movie, where the second and third half was hijinks, labor, and court, but as the movie was going on, I wasn't hating myself movie. And also, most Netflix movies are not great, but this was one of the better Netflix movies, and this is one of the movies I did like from the platform. I enjoyed the movie a lot more than I thought I was going to. It's cute, it's predictable, the direction is very good, the writing is good, but this is able to handle a ridiculous premise as well as it can, and it approaches it with the same generosity you would give to a Christmas movie. It has very much that vibe. It's good. This was a fun time. And they were very charming. Now, I could have expected this movie to be a lot worse, but it wasn't. And it's amusing, it was breezy, it was charming. It's located, nostalgic, sentimental, and short. It wasn't too long, it wasn't too boring, it wasn't too slow, and this was another one of my favorite romance films from 2020 because, let's face it, the worst romance movie of 2020 was After We Collided. I hate that movie so badly, but Love Guaranteed, I'm gonna actually tell you to watch this on Netflix. I highly recommend it. And that is it for round 2 of my review roundup. Now, this is probably another one of the longest ones, but there will be timestamps for each movie in case you don't want to hear me talk about all these movies, because there are 20 movies here. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of either one of these movies have you seen, or the video in general. I'm sorry if this was a little long. You guys keep it cool, join the Epictasticness, and I will see you for the final review roundup. And bye bye.